was born literally a kilometre from here. Down there, a beautiful little street called The Crescent. He had a strange childhood. He didn't walk until he was 7 years old. Now, we never did find out what exactly was wrong with him, whether it was psychological or physical or a combination of both. Because despite the fact that three of his brothers were doctors and his uncle was a doctor, there are no records. Now, Bram was a bit of, he could be a bit evasive on that, and we think he might have destroyed any records he laid his hands on to keep us guessing. And sometimes when I mention those 7 years to people, they say to me, well, it's no wonder he wrote a weird story like Dracula. He wasn't doing a lot more for 7 years. He had plenty of time to think it out, hadn't he? Well, perhaps he had. Anyway, he's a role model for any young person who might feel inadequate or whatever, which he surely did. He couldn't walk. He didn't write it himself. I couldn't stand upright until I was 7. Because as he grew up, he turned the tables completely. And he grew up to be a big man, 6'2". He went to Trinity College. He couldn't go to normal school. He had to go to private school. But when he was 14, 15, 16, he went to Trinity. And he turned the tables, became a top-class sportsman, if you don't mind, for a guy who couldn't walk. And he won medals and trophies in weightlifting, walking, swimming, cycling, and became a top-class rugby player. So that's why I say he's a good role model. If you think you're out of it when you're young, well, I mean, look at Bram Stoker. If he can do it, I can do it. Now, he loved Trinity, and when he finished there, he became a civil servant in the old Imperial Dublin Castle. That's where British rule was administered in Ireland. Have you been to the castle?
No, not yet.
Yeah, well, you should. It's well worth the visit. The old civil service was based there. Bram went to work there, but he didn't like it. He wasn't an office-type person, although he spent 10 years there. But his real interest in life was drama and the theatre. And he was so bored in the civil service that he began to write and attend as many drama shows as he could. And attending a show in a famous Dublin theatre, which is gone now, the Theatre Royale, right in the city centre, he came across a British actor called Henry Irving. Now, if you ever study drama in any form, you'll come across that name. He was the most famous actor. He was the Tom Cruise or whoever you regard as the male film star at the moment. He was that in the cinema, and the drama at the time. There was no cinema. So Bram saw him in action, playing roles like Macbeth and Hamlet and King Lear and these, and he was literally mesmerised by his acting ability. So Bram started to write drama columns. He became Ireland's first drama critique, if you like, in the main paper in Dublin at the time, the Dublin Evening Mail. And he wrote articles about Irving. Irving was based in London. He used to come to Dublin touring. And Irving was a very, very vain man, a posh. He was a British snob, actually. Good actor, but that's there his ability ended. When he saw these articles that Bram Stoker was writing, and he said, I must meet the man who's writing these, because they were praising him up to the high heavens. So when Irving came to Dublin, the only place he'd stay was at the Shelbourne Hotel, which is, St. Stephen's Green. Well, I'm sure you'll be in town sooner or later. This is right in the city centre. You have a beautiful green called St. Stephen's Green. And around that green actually was Bram Stoker's, what I call his stomping ground when he left Clontarf. And the Shelbourne Hotel is on the green. So too is a theatre he went to, which is still there, called the Gaiety Theatre, all around Stephen's Green. Now, anyway, Irving sent for Stoker, they met, and they got on brilliantly. They admired each other, not in a sexual way, but business-wise and art-wise. And he met Irving a few times over a few years. And the upshot of it was that he asked Bram to become his manager, his secretary, and to come to England and manage a theatre that he owned called the Lyceum Theatre in London. So Bram said, all my birthdays have come at once. He hated the civil service. This wasn't out. But he had to check with somebody. Who do you think that was? Well, his girlfriend. He was engaged to be married. This was November 1878, and they were engaged to be married 1 year later. Now, she was a very beautiful local girl called Florence Balcom. She lived in the same street, so you can say, well, he didn't go very far to find a wife, did he? So she had been, in fact, courted by a man called Oscar Wilde. Does that name mean anything to you?
Yeah.
Oscar Wilde?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Oscar turned out to be, shall we say, he preferred me to you, let's put it that way. Anyway, Bram consulted with Florence, and they decided to bring forward their wedding. So in 1 week, in 1878, they got married in another beautiful church, again beside Stephen's Green. If you're in there, you can visit all these places within an hour. just off the green called St. Anne's Church, Dawson Street. In that week, they got married, he resigned his job, and they went off to England, and he stayed with Irving for 25 years until Irving died in 1905 as manager of the licensed Club Britain and London's top theatre at the time. Attended regularly by the royal family and the Prime Minister and so on and so forth. Now, in that time, Bram wrote in his spare time. By the way, the relationship between himself and Irving, Bram saw it as equal. Irving didn't. Irving saw it very much as the master and the servant. And he worked Bram really hard. And Bram brought a lot of new ideas to the theatre, like premium of tickets, for example. He was the first to do that. And he picked proper material for Irving. And Irving became the first actor to be knighted. Because acting wasn't regarded as a real profession then. Now it was, and a new status when someone was made a knight. And one other thing that did as well was they toured America 8 times. Now, touring America didn't mean you went to Heathrow and flew to Kennedy. There was no Heathrow and there was no Kennedy. It meant bringing props, wigs, costumes, actors, everything. On a train from London to Liverpool, a boat across to America, get off in New York, and they crisscross a young America by rail. Stoker estimated they did 50,000 miles, twice around the equator in the trips. And he was in charge of it, he was responsible for everything, and it worked real hard, and it was to tell it his health in the end, because he died a relatively young man. Anyway, he wrote in his spare time, and he wrote 18 books, but the one he's known for is Dracula. Now, Dracula has a record that will never, ever be equalled, never mind broken. For example, it's undisputedly the biggest selling novel ever written in any language anywhere in the world. It's been translated into every major language and most minor languages. The first translation, for example, was in Icelandic. The Hollywood people tell us they can trace 1,000 major films inspired by that book. And you can take it nowadays that any horror, be it a comic strip, be it a drama, be it a music, whatever, horror is based on Dracula. It has its roots, it's inspired by Dracula. And they tell us that somewhere in the world, every week, a new show, again, be it an opera or a musical or a straight drama, a comedy or whatever, somewhere in the world, a new one based on Dracula appears. There are clubs, societies, newsletters, publications across the globe, all inspired by Bram Stoker. And as I say, we barely know the man in Ireland. In fact, people don't think he's Irish at all. He was 31 before he left Ireland. And the other thing is that the book, people say, well, that's based on Vlad the Impaler in Romania. It isn't, you know. It's not at all. He was never in Romania in his life. Now, he did set part of it in Romania for the simple reason that the myth of the vampire as we know it today did emanate from the Carpathian mountain areas. And to be fashionable, to have the story accepted as a true vampire story, he did set part of it there. And Vlad the Impaler was a 15th century prince who was forever fighting the Muslims. Now, he wasn't a nice guy. When he captured prisoners of war, he brought them home to an encampment, which was surrounded by spiked wooden poles. And when he and his followers sat down to dinner, he had his prisoners of war impaled through their belly button and other places. And they sat down to eat their meal, listening to the blood dripping. Now, that's not a vampire, that's a sadist. And there's a big difference. So we have reclaimed the Irishness of the story. And Bram, as I said, never visited this country in his life. And we see it from Irish history. For example, the most hated person in Ireland at the time was the landlord. And there was a landlord in every village. And we say, metaphorically speaking, is Dracula that landlord sucking the blood of the peasants? If you're around town, there's a church down along the quays called St. Mickens or St. Michael's. And by some atmospheric freak, bodies in there have been preserved as a natural mummification. You can shake hands with a skeleton 1,000 years old, and some of their fingernails are still growing. Go visit it. Now, Bram's family had a very involved there, and he used to visit that as a child. Now, did he get the idea of the undead from these mummified bodies? That they weren't dead, they're undead. We say to him, or we say, what the hell do you mean by undead? You're either dead or alive. But he says the vampire is dead during the day and alive at night. I'll give you one other, and there's hundreds of stories from Ireland when he got this vampire. One other is based on suicide. In Stoker's time, and indeed up to the present day, some people have a stigma about suicide. You know, it's a terrible thing. Now, in Stoker's time, if you committed suicide, you were regarded as cutting yourself off from the love of humankind and pushing yourself out into the wilderness, unwanted and unloved, which essentially is what a vampire is. You don't want a vampire in your house, do you? Nobody wants to be near them. They're pushed away from society. Now, people believe that if you committed suicide, you became a vampire unless you got a stake through the heart treatment before you were buried. Now, there was a little, and you weren't allowed to be buried in consecrated ground. In ordinary churchyard, you had to be buried in what was known as the suicide plot. There was one of these graveyards right beside Stoker's house. And we know he played there for hours as a child. Again, with his fertile imagination, did he get the idea of the vampire being some of these suicides who were buried without the stake through the heart pit, came back as vampires at midnight to the blood of the living. And one more, his mother came from actually the same part of the country as I come from, Sligo. And she lived through she had a terrible influence on him because when he was 7 years old, nobody believed he would even live except his mother, as mothers do. And it was she nursed him through those seven long, weary years and told him many stories. And one of the stories she told him concerning a cholera that hit Sligo. It hit all Europe, but it was Asiatic cholera. It came across from the east, across Europe, into Britain and into Ireland. And it seems to have hit this part of the country very, very severely. It wiped out 3/4 of the population of the town she lived in. Now, she told him, and she left it writing, witnessing, when you were dying with the cholera, there was no cure. People wouldn't even touch you because you become contaminated. So she saw big pits or graves being dug, and people pushed into them, were pushed in with wooden poles, because I was saying no one to touch you, and literally buried alive and covered up. Now, did you get the undead from this? That some of these people came back as vampires to haunt mankind for the terrible, terrible way they were treated. You know, it's as good a story as any. Now, there are lots of stories that Bram was brought up on, and this is where his vampire came from. It has nothing, believe you me, nothing to do with Transylvania. Have any of you read Dracula? You don't read it. It's good. It's very good. I'm sure you've seen the film.
Yeah.
It never took off really until the film started. I'm not laughing, he didn't make much money. He didn't. It was a kind of a bestseller, but not anything to, shall we say, shout about. Full stop. There was only Nosferatu was an early film, Asylum, was made in 1921. But it was only when Universal Studios purchased the rights from Stoker's wife, Florence, and made the first talking movie, then it took off. And the rest is history. There's been every decade there's a series of vampire films, Dracula films, and offshoots and all the rest of it. And of course, the women always went out. Bram didn't make money, she did. And she lived to be a very old woman. She died in, I think it was 1935, and lived very comfortably. And his son, Noel, he had one son. That time, copyright lasted 50 years after he died. Now it was uncanny. Bram died in 1912, and almost to the day, 50 years later, in 1962, his son Noel died. And Noel on his deathbed said, "Fair play to our dad," he said. "He kept me going to the end." The copyright, he was living off the royalties of the book, and he died almost to the day. It was uncanny. And just one last word of Stoker. He never, for some reason, to this day, he hasn't got the acclaim he deserves. I mean, we're slow in Ireland, I'll admit that. If other people own a man like this, well, they'll be shouting off the rooftops. And I'm hoarse preaching it to the government here and to give us a few bob to set up a centre and so on. Hopefully, this is a centenary year. Hopefully, we're on the road now at long last. But just one last word of him. As I say, he never got much publicity. He was overshadowed by Irving. He was overshadowed by Dracula that he created. And the week he died, the Titanic went down. So that got all the headlines. So he was eclipsed all his life. So to me, he's one of the greatest achievers, not just in Ireland, but in any country. And please God, when you're back here on your honeymoon or whatever, we'll have a centre open and you can come and visit us. Right, we'll move on.